Perfect. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. Before we start, I'll just introduce myself first. My name's Helen. I am one of the co-president for International Pre-Health Society. I'm an international pre-med. I'm from China. And the board member, do you guys want to go around and introduce yourself before we pass the floor to our speakers?
I can go. I'm Anya. I'm sorry, I'm a bit of a mess. I am just running everywhere. I'm also one of the co-presidents with Helen. I'm from Mumbai, India, and it is nice to see all of you guys.
Ife, do you want to go next?
Yep, I'm about to say, yeah, I can go next. And my name is Ife. I am also from China, and I am a pre-health student majoring molecular cellular biology. And I will popcorn to Lily.
Hi, my name is Lily. I am originally from China, but then also from Canada. I am the programming and outreach coordinator for IPHS.
And then our treasurer is also here, but she's multitasking right now, so she probably can't speak out aloud. But let's shout out to Fei Yi. She's our treasurer. And then I'll pass it to Dixie.
Hey, sorry, I just got on. I'm Dixie. I'm working on outreach with Lily. Are we doing anything else or?
You can popcorn to Alice, our last
Okay.
member on the team.
What was wrong with their whiteboard, bro? You got problems with that?
Yeah,
are
I
we just
guess
doing
yeah.
Okay, introduction. Sorry, I'm running a little. My name's Alice, and I'm a junior. I study physics and neuroscience, and I do a lot of like media, social media, and publicity for our club. So nice to meet you.
All right, thanks all the e-board members. And now let's pass the floor to the speakers, Zach and Fatima. Yay.
How do you want to go first? I'll let you go first.
Sure, sounds good. Hi, everybody. My name is Fatima Zora. I go by Fati. I'm from Rabat, Morocco, North Africa. I went to undergrad in the US, and my major was cell molecular biology, and my minor was chemistry. And I took 2 gap years to do research at WashU in St. Louis. And now I'm a first-year medical student at the Medical College of Wisconsin.
All right. And hi, everyone. My name is Zach. I am originally from China, and I went to Hopkins for undergrad, so I literally know every single one of you where you are. And when Alice said you're a physics major, that's Bloomberg. I know exactly where it is.
Yes,
and everyone
yes, this is Bloomberg.
Like little dorms, either Charles Commons or 93rd, I'm assuming. So
That's nice.
And Nolan's.
Very accurate.
Anya, is that Nolan's kitchen when you were having food?
No, I'm on the other side of Commons.
Uh-huh.
I'm just sitting in.
Okay.
Yeah,
no, it brings back a lot of memories. So.
Yeah, I was just running. I was at a dinner, and I'm just like, run.
Yeah, so I'm originally, so I did molecular cellular biology at Hopkins, and then I took 2 gap years right after, and now I'm a third year, I'm a first year PhD student, but third year I'm a student at Harvard. So yeah, if you guys, that's everything. If I'm missing anything, let me know.
All right, thank you. So next, it'll be pretty nice if you guys want to, let's say, give us a short monologue of your journey from let's say, from the moment you decide you want to do medicine, or what make you decide you want to do medicine, and then let's say through undergraduate, and what might be some difficulty you ran into, and then how did you solve them, until like today where you are right now.
I can go first. To me, my passion for medicine started when I was, volunteering for the community in Morocco. I've noticed even, as a high school student, there's a lot of misinformation out there about medicine and health in general. One of the most shocking experiences that I've seen that kind of got me started into thinking about medicine is um, a lot of, people have diabetes, and some of them they develop diabetic neuropathy. And there's this community I was volunteering in that's like on the outskirts of the capital of Morocco, where there were like rumors that if you put hot water on your like legs that are swollen because of the diabetic neuropathy, then that cures it. That makes the neuropathy go away. And I would like see patients with their legs burnt for no reason, and they couldn't feel the pain of the hot water because their nerves aren't really working properly because they have diabetic neuropathy and they have no idea. So that was one of the things, and this was like one of like 100 things that these like fake health misinformation that's going on in communities. And I kind of started like researching it, and developed a passion for medicine. And then I just started like volunteering more and more, and I started getting involved with the United Nations in Morocco and in other countries. And it just I felt like, medicine is what I wanted to do, and I wanted to help fight that misinformation and help those communities, at least get the basic medical information and like accurate information for them. And as when I was growing up, I played competitive tennis. So I played a lot of international tournaments, and I played for the Moroccan national team, and I got to a point where I had to choose. I thought I had to choose between tennis, like a professional career, and medicine. Turns out I didn't really have to choose when I found out you could do college athletics in the US and at least, gain more time with tennis because I didn't want to give that up at 17, which is like when I graduated high school. So, playing those tournaments in Europe, I met a lot of American coaches that offered me full scholarships to go to the US. And that's how I ended up coming to the US. And, as no surprise to all of you, when you were a freshman as pre-med and international, you were told that you wouldn't get in. My advisor was the first person who told me that I could not get in, that I had to switch careers. And it was very like shocking to me because my advisor was a very like renowned person in her field. She was an MD PhD and a very like famous pediatric neurosurgeon. And so I was like, okay, well, if she says I can't get into med school, I probably can't get in. But especially coming from your own advisor who's supposed to advise you for your future. And yeah, so I at that time, of course, like I kind of lost hope, and I was like juggling between like being a D1 athlete and being pre-med and the language barrier, and it was very, very challenging at the beginning. But I met this one person through a connection. He was a medical student who got in on an F1 visa, and he was from Tanzania, and he went to University of Minnesota Medical School. And he was basically my mentor throughout the whole undergrad process. He was the only person that I knew was international and got in. And at the time, like by my junior year, University of Minnesota stopped accepting international students. So I was also crushed, and I was like, okay, the only person that I know got in, his school stopped accepting internationals. Well, that's great. But I think just going through MCAS and seeing that there's what 2 or 3 internationals I got accepted to a school honestly gave me hope because I was like, well, I could be one of those threes. So when I graduated my undergrad, I didn't think I was ready to go to med school right away. So I actually did not take my MCAT until my first gap year. And I've always wanted to explore research more because I didn't have the opportunity as an undergrad because of how like my busy schedule was with tennis. So at WashU, I really loved doing my research and I learned so much. And I'm glad I did it that way because I was not ready to go to med school straight out of college. So I really encourage gap years if you don't think you're ready, especially as an international student. I think also gap years can be a way of like strengthening your application and giving you some time off at the same time because you need a breather. And yeah, so I applied to medical school last cycle and I'm a first year now, almost an M2. I can't believe like time really flies. So yeah, let me know if you have any other questions.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. Because I feel like it's really relatable because since that I know most of international pre-meds, they join the journey pretty late, like either sophomore or junior, because like, the freshman year, we always run into somebody that say, oh yeah, you can. So it's really important to send a message out there. It's like it's never too late to be pre-med, and then there's, take as many gap years as you want, stuff like that. Right. Thank you, Fatima.
Okay, I'm going next. All right, so a short monologue. So I guess my journey thinking about medicine was never that, like, it wasn't that early. I never thought about medicine because I don't know, most of the people, I guess people on the call who are from China probably know, like, medicine isn't quite the profession, like, it's not your first thing that you think about because of, how Chinese healthcare system is, and parents don't really want their only child, to go into a profession that's so, like, psychological and physically draining. So that was never on my radar, and my family, we don't have a doctor in the recent, like, 3 generations. So I think that's something I never really got to discover. But I think my interest started with when I was in high school in China, where I first fell in love with biology. That was kind of where my starting point. And when I was applying to college and eventually coming to Hopkins, I just knew something I want to do. I want to do something with biology. So I applied to BME. I did my first freshman year in BME. And then that was the year where I discovered I'm not super interested in kind of being on the engineering side, bringing device or bringing in therapy or computational products to patients. I want to be physically, interacting with patients. That started with kind of having some exposure to the pre-med community at Hopkins, which is phenomenal. And it's also probably like 50% of freshmen. So it's kind of inevitable to think about pre-med. So that's when I started thinking more about it, and I decided to switch out of BME because I wanted to take some other classes due to the BME's pretty rigorous schedule. So I decided to do MoCell, and then throughout that time, I decided to give research a try. That is kind of the typical trajectory at Hopkins as a freshman. You hear about research the second you step on campus. So and I think sorry about the noise. Because of my interest, I think I was also just thinking about coming to college, decided to really discover things I absolutely love. I decided to do basic science research in HIV. So I shoot out a few emails, and that was history. So I worked in Dr. Kenneth Whitworth's laboratory in the Department of Molecular Comparative Pathobiology down in the medical school for 5 years. Starting from that email, which has been super enriching experience. And then throughout college, absolutely loved all the pre-med courses. Some of the classes that you will encounter as MoCell will teach you exactly how to think like a scientist and a professor, and like a doctor too. So I think that was where I started to really fall in love with the discipline of medicine and science, I think. And also having the hospital that's like 20-30 minutes down, and you have so many exposure to clinical opportunities, whether it's shadowing or kind of engaging in projects. So I worked on a project in the ER in Hopkins, linking a patient that's vulnerable to PrEP. So thinking about like equity and accessibility of these preventative measures, that's where I really kind of felt invigorated, because it's when I interact with patients. So I think I want to echo what Fati said really well, is you, as international students, you definitely are going to be at a disadvantage. But I think what really helped was, I don't know if any of you guys are mentees of Miss Snipeman. She is fantastic. She's, I think, the director of pre-med now. So she is the one that really, like, she gave me the usual spiel, like, look at my transcript, looking at everything that I've done. They were like, she was like, she gives you the, I don't know, like, but she never said you can never. she always there is, I'm not worried about you if you're American, but I'm not going to be there to tell you should not apply. So she like really encouraged me. And also I think partially it's because I'm stubborn. I don't like people telling me you cannot do anything. So I decided to apply right after I graduated. So that summer I dedicated the summer to MCAT and took 2 gap years. One of the first gap year was doing the BSMS degree in Mosel. And then the second year, you know, when you're applying, it takes a whole year. You don't really do anything in that year. So there's that. So I matriculated in med school during the pandemic. So interview was in person, but all the revisit was virtual. And now can't believe it's been my 3rd year at Harvard and has been great. Absolutely love all the people that, you know, I think med school does a really good job selecting people that will fit the ethos of the school. And well, depends. I think it's a lot, but I'm very lucky to have the best 33 people in my program. And absolutely love every single one of them. They inspire me to be better and do, you know, becoming a better physician every day. So highly like, and I think my journey, even at Hopkins back then, when I first, I guess I know one person who got into MD. She's also from Hopkins. She's a year ahead of me. Now she's at Stanford. So basically when I went to interview at Stanford, I stayed with her. She's the only one that kind of gave me hope. That I knew international students can do it, but also she is phenomenal. So I was like, oh, I don't know. It must be a really high threshold to pass. So I think that's when, you know, when Azan reached out to me when I first got in Harvard, he was saying, oh, let's get this organization going. So we really had the hope of building a mentor database when now I think we're close to 200, Fati. So there's around 200 of us. So you can definitely become one of the 200. And I definitely believe in all of you. And that's it.
Wow, thank you so much. It's really right. Thank you for both of you for sharing such a powerful journey. And then there's many, many like very inspiring thing that we can take from, you know, you two's perspective. And before I'd like to like before jumping into all those questions I got, like we got from the survey before this meeting. I think it will be really helpful to explain to people who are not so familiar with the term, like what's the difference between the MD program and the MD PhD program? Like, are there yeah, I think that'll be like a really good question to, you know, to get it clear before we moving to depth.
Yeah.
Okay, this
So
is Zach's perspective of expertise. I want to say, go ahead.
yeah. No, I think for MD PhD, I just got an email from the Hopkins pre-professional. They were talking about having a session with Dr. Terry Rogers, who is the director of the MD PhD advising part. I think he will give you a spiel on like what it means. But for international students, I think the things that you guys have to worry about. So first of all, when I applied, I didn't apply MD PhD because I think we as international students very constrained by funding. So we're not eligible for NIH funding. So most of the schools that only have MSTP degrees, MSTP slots cannot sponsor. So you have to apply to schools that have extra money setting aside for students that are not MSTP. So like smaller schools with smaller MD PhD class size, they will probably have, let's say, I think BU has like 4 to 5. And then I think all of them are MSTP. So those money come from NIH. Here at Harvard, I think we have close to 25 to 30. And I think it's probably half-half. So like 15 of them or 20 of them get the money from NIH. And Harvard set aside another like a few $1 million so that it pays for the rest of the 10, 15. So I didn't apply to MD PhD in the beginning because I didn't want to give up my dream to become a doctor simply because I love research. And also, you know, you always have a chance to get a PhD after MD if you want. So I applied that, but Harvard has this process called affiliation, which is an outdated term, is you just indicate, I want to do a PhD once you get here. And they will make sure that you go through the pipeline of applying to PhD programs and eventually get fully funded starting from your PhD years. So the first 2 years you'll have to pay for the tuition and go through med school, but the rest of the 6 years they will cover you through this non-MSTP funding pool. So that is kind of the career track of becoming a physician and scientist, where in your future research and pushing the boundary of science is going to be a big focus of your career in whatever capacity you want it to be. And that is an ongoing kind of internal debate, even for me, and I think for most of the MD PhDs, is how much research I want to do and how much I want to see patients. And that changes day to day, month to month. So yeah.
Thank you for the clarification, also the extra details on, the funding part. That's a really, really useful knowledge to know. And okay, let's jump into the question that we got from students. Oh, also for people who are like in the Zoom, feel free to unmute and ask question, or if you don't feel like unmuting yourself, just type your question to the chat. So we can read it out to the speakers and then we can get them answered. Yeah, feel free to jump in anytime. And then so at the same time, I'm gonna go through the list of questions that we got from the survey. Okay, so like starting from the undergraduate part question. So what was the most meaningful experience during undergrad that you had? And then you probably put on your application as well.
Okay, so to me, my most meaningful experience was teaching at lab, so as a TA. Specifically, not just because of the teaching part, I really loved teaching, and it was mostly because I really struggled with that class my freshman year because of the language barrier and like taking a lab for the first time because we didn't have that in high school. So I really struggled in that class freshman year. And then my junior year, the director of the biomedical science department asked me to teach as a TA when they only have master students who actually teach that class. So I really, really was honored to have that opportunity and really enjoyed teaching the class. And, it's just, to me, it was more of the little things, like I started learning English a little before high school, okay? And now I'm like a junior in college and I'm teaching in English, a class that's like college level. So to me, it was a huge, huge accomplishment for myself. And like it showed a lot of growth between my freshman and junior year. So that was my most meaningful experience. It wasn't like, I don't really think that there's experiences that are more how do I say this, that are more that look more interesting than others. I think it's more like, what did you learn from it and how did you go about, like, if you failed at something or struggled, how did you end up like overcoming that? So that to me was my most meaningful experience. Zach?
Well, apparently Boston's very rowdy today, but so I think for me, my most meaningful experience, so you get 3 on your MCAS application. You have 3 slots to have 250 extra words. Is that right, Fati? Sounds right, 250?
Yeah, something like that. I think it's in characters.
Yeah, you get 150 for every activity, but you get an extra like 250 words to describe activities. So for my 3, I guess the 2 things that I think the most meaningful, I kind of alluded to it during my first monologue is, so first thing is research. I think especially for people who on this Zoom want to do MD PhD, you kind of have to have one of them as research because otherwise it would look really bad. So research, I started from not knowing what a pipette is. So the first day in lab, my PI showed me how to use a pipette. And I just had a weight boat and I literally just transfer 1,000 microliters of water and see if I can get to 1 gram multiple times, like in multiple hours. That's what I did. So starting from that to publishing my own paper, that took 5 years. So, also, but then I want to say, like, you don't have to publish your own papers. It is the time when you sit down across the screen, and I assume most of the med school interview is going to stay virtual for a while because equity reasons, is to be able to convey your passion. Like having a paper looks good, but if you sit across the screen and you cannot convey the significance of the study, you cannot tell them about why you love the study, why you want to keep doing research, then it's really bad. So I would say that is the most significant experience, is growing as a scientist and thinking about how to have an idea and be able to carry out like a protocol and be able to interpret the data and troubleshoot. So I think that's the most important thing. And then the second thing I did was, the prep project at Hopkins ED. I think it's still going. So I think the lasting impact is what drives me, because it was the first program of sorts in the country. It is being able to give the most vulnerable population, not the most privileged population who can pay out of pocket for prep. That's a few $100 copay with good insurance, or so giving, because back then the thought process was ED typically serve as the safety net primary care for most of the patient in downtown Baltimore. They come in for their primary care. So being able to push this like preventative measure for patients who are the most vulnerable with HIV is something that we really felt passionate about. And that was something that, put in hundreds of hours screening patients and talking to them and educate them. And I think that was something when, the most impact that I've had is not being able to start them on the drug. I think in the end, when I screened 100 patients, probably 4 started PrEP successfully, but being able to disseminate the information and going from patient knowing what is PrEP to, oh, I'm going to talk to all the people that I know around me about it. And I think that's the most enriching experience for me to understand what's the importance of clinical care and like education and also public health. So that's the 2 experience I put on there.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. So I think that question also sort of answered the other question we have here, which is, what do you think what do you think that make your application profile stand out as an international student, and what aspects make you stand out? So I think those are, those answers from you guys also answered this question, but also feel free to interrupt me or add more details, like if you feel like, okay, there's more you can elaborate on. All right. So oh, okay, there's one question about international shadowing. So do medical school accept international shadowing? Like if I shadow a doctor in my home country, yeah, will that count towards shadow hours?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I put a lot of international shadowing hours, and I wasn't told that it wasn't possible to do that. So if you feel like that, if for some reason you don't have shadowing opportunities in the US, feel free to add some from your home country. But also, it's important to have shadowing in the US because health systems are different from country to country, and sometimes it could be a deal breaker about going into medicine or not, depending on how the health system is in a specific country. So I would encourage you to also have shadowing in the US if you can.
Yeah, I highly suggest, I think I'll highly suggest, if you guys have the opportunity to go home in the summer or spring break, go shadow. Because that, I wouldn't say in all my interviews, but at least in like 50% of my interview that comes up. Because, as international students, we always talk about how difficult it is for us. But like, you have to think about what is the advantage. Like, what is one thing you can bring to the table that other people just cannot? Is your tie to another culture, another healthcare system, and being able to shadow and be able to be astute, to observe and see what's the difference between the two. What can the US system take from other culture or from other healthcare system, and how can other healthcare systems learn from the US? I think this synergy is exactly what you can bring to the table. And that has been like a pretty good, I think I will have to say it's a very plus point, and you can also put in a lot of hours. I think when I did it was in winter break in China, and I stood in the OR for like 12 hours a day for like 2 weeks, and that adds up. But I think they never ask you, oh, how many hours you spent? That's never the focus. It is, I think one time someone just cold asked me, can you analyze the 2 healthcare systems for me and tell me one thing that you will change about each? And I think that's something that once you can give a good answer that is, being observant and being curious and being analytical and have a good answer, that really, I think, will make your case very strong.
Yeah, I agree with Zach. I actually, in a couple of interviews, I had it come up when they would ask me what is the difference between the health system in Morocco and in the US, and what would you do differently in both? So definitely be very analytical about that. There's also a really interesting book that I read about all sorts of health system. I think it was called The Healing of America, but it's a very comprehensive book, and you guys would want to read it because it definitely helped me answer my interview questions for sure. Just, I guess, as a conclusion, just be very well-rounded and like aware of like how health systems operate and everything, especially in the US.
Right. I was gonna say, like, because I'm currently reading this book called The Price We Pay. So it's about American healthcare system. So yeah, I'll definitely write down the name of your book, Fati. So make sure I read it. Okay. Right. Again, feel free to jump in anytime if you have a question, or just put it in the chat. All right. Let's see. Oh, okay. Here's the school. Here's a question about how many school, how many number like of school it's appropriate number for us to apply as an international pre-med. Do we just apply to like all the school to accept us?
Okay, I can start. So first of all, it depends on how much money you want to spend. So that is definitely a big thing. So I don't think I can confidently say there are statistics out there, like what's the minimum threshold you have to apply. But I would say from how I felt comfortable, just surveying people that I knew, like I think American students like average 10 to 15. That's what I've heard. And I think for international students, if you want to feel safe and you have the money to spare and understand that is also a privilege to be able to do that, I think 20. So I applied to 27, 25, 27 in the end. By the end of like August, you were like, I don't want to write another secondary. So I was aiming at 30, but then I just got so tired of it. I was like, if this one secondary makes the difference between me being my student or not, I deserve it. So I was like, you know what, I'm not gonna finish that. So it was okay. And I think it really depends. I also know some American students apply to 50 medical schools, and she got waitlisted at 1. So that chance is very like, I don't think there's statistics saying if you apply to this number, you will get in. So just knowing that, yeah.
Yeah, 100% agree with Zach. I actually set a primary to 20 schools, but only ended up writing a secondary for like 16 or 17. I really got lazy, and like the process is like drowning. Like, a lot of people talk about, the MCAT is difficult, right? Writing your extracurriculars, your application, your personal statement, that's difficult. But like the process of like sending that application, applying and waiting and writing those secondaries, I personally think is worse. So to me, I really just, got lazy towards the end. I was like, okay, this is it. 17 secondaries, one of them better accept me. That's how I thought of it. But in terms of like what schools to apply to, you need to be careful with that because a lot of schools say they do accept international students, but they actually don't. So really look at MSAR. I don't know if you guys have heard of MSAR. What does it stand for, Zach? Medical school admission?
Registry something? I don't know.
Something. I'll put the link on the chat. Yeah.
Yeah.
You get a subscription for like, was it $30 every 2 years or something like that? Or $20. I can't remember what it was. It's probably pricier now, but it gives you the statistics of like how many like out of state and state international students a school accepts. So don't just Google schools that accept international students and apply to all of those schools. Go look at MSAR because that comes directly from the schools. And if you go to MSAR, you're gonna find that a lot of schools that say they do accept international students, they have accepted 0 in the past 5 years. So don't be wasting your money there. Okay. That's all. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
very
thank
true.
you.
Oh, sorry, Lily, go ahead.
That's all right. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing that resource. I think that also answers one of the other questions that students sent us, which is how to filter out schools that actually accept international students from the ones that say they accept international students, but really do. Yeah, feel free to add on to anything along that questions, but
Yeah, I guess one thing is you can't really control this, but I think within my 26, 27 that I submitted, one school kind of got like right after I submitted, like 2 days later said, oh, this year, I don't know what department controls education, but Department of Education, let's say that, didn't give them the sponsorship for international students. So MSAR was kind of your data for last year, doesn't translate to this year. But in all the time, it should hold true unless something changes about, you know, them with the federal government. Somehow federal government didn't give them the permission for some other reason. Just be aware of that. They will send an email to you.
I see.
Yeah,
Like,
the other thing. Sorry, go ahead.
oh, no, you go ahead. I was just gonna ask something about so I heard my friend they were actually calling the admission office to ask if they are, accepting or tend to accept international. Do you think that's also a viable option to do?
Yeah, definitely email and call. Like you're not gonna lose anything, but just like double checking. So I would definitely do that. The other thing I was gonna add is something that I found out the other day is that so the Medical College of Wisconsin, they're changing their curriculum next year. Right? Something completely different and new, and they haven't gotten authorization from the government for international students to have that curriculum. So the Medical College of Wisconsin actually this past cycle, we're not accepting international students. Even though if you go on the internet, you're gonna see in every list, MCW does accept international students. So try to go on their website and see if there's updates because like secondary, like all that money, like it adds up. So you don't want to be like if it's like $150 that you could put in a different school where you actually have a chance to get in. So like make sure you look at the updates for each school separately. And it's not like I mean, we're not like Americans where we could apply to 200 schools. So there's only a few schools. You can just go on their website and look at updates or email and call. And also when you call them, there's some people in the administration that actually don't know what an international student is. Sometimes they think a green card holder is also an international student just because they have a different non-Americanized name or whatever, however you want to call it. So make sure you're like, I have an F1 visa or whichever international visa you're on. Am I eligible to apply? Just be kind of, clear about that.
Oh, thank you. I wasn't thinking about the fact that, right, they might not differentiate between, green card and international, which is which are two different, legal terms. Also, we have a question in the chat. So Lydia asked, could you hurt your chances of admission if you express desire to practice medicine outside the US, to, for example, a more global health focus?
I think one thing I would say is just really focus on your phrasing and framing it. Like global health is good. I think you want to practice outside of the US might be a little bit interesting. Like depends on the school, obviously. Like I think at schools that has traditionally had more of a less regional focus on health, more bigger name private institutions might be okay with that because most of their students, you can't really technically control where your graduates are going. But I think I would say like certain state schools, like I think one of the state schools that like I applied to didn't really like end up have anything meaningful follow up from it. It's like even on their secondary, they ask, how do you contribute to the health of people in the state? So I highly doubt if you say you want to practice outside of the US on that interview, I don't think that's going to be looking like, I don't think that looks good for you. So I would say more so, I think global health is good. Like expand on that. You love to do global health stuff. I know some of my friends who currently in med schools are doing global health projects, but I wouldn't say you want to exclusively practice medicine outside of the US at this stage. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Zach. Also, global health can also be in the US as the other thing. But it's really difficult because, like Zach was saying, there's a lot of like secondaries where they ask you, hey, do you intend on practicing in this state? If so, at what specialty, for example? But I know, like, at the end of the day, the US has a huge physician shortage. So it might be a red flag if you only focus on like global health. I want to be like a global physician. So just be careful, like Zach was saying, about the phrasing of it. Because if you go to a state school, like they want physicians that practice there because they want to address their state shortage. And this is also the reason why they do not accept international students in the first place, is because the US has a huge physician shortage. And if you meet, at least me, like when I went to college in the Midwest, most of my friends, they all want to stay in their states. That's the whole purpose for them, like getting accepted to their state schools, because their medical schools wants them to stay and practice there, and that's exactly what they're going to do. So this is like the actual basics of why we don't get in anywhere, because we're not tied to any states. So going back to your country, the school is like, well, I'm going to invest in you. Even though you're paying the money, I'm going to invest in you, but I don't want you going anywhere. I want you to help the US. So just be careful about the wording of that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's answers a lot of my question as well. Because I was been thinking, let's say, oh, maybe joining Doctors Without Border in the future or something like that. But I think my takeaway is that at least for the admission part or or the interview part, just focus on, let's say, how I might be able to contribute to your school or like your environment upon my admission, stuff like that. And then, oh yeah, thanks for Lydia, and thanks for adding the notes. The AMC fee assistant program has recently been updated, and international students can now apply for free assistance. Yay! You can apply to 20 school for free. Wow, that's a huge help. Because otherwise it's like $100 per school, something like that. All right, thanks. Let's see. So we currently don't have any question in the chat. So let's jump back to the list of questions we got from previous surveys. Oh, right. So both of you have mentioned staying to do 2 gap years before, the 2 university program, like between undergraduate and then your matriculation for medical school. So how do you navigate the visa situation? Like also, let's say for the future for residency, what's the plan for, let's say, what kind of visa should I apply to, or legal status, stuff like that?
In terms of like gap year research, so when I'm only aware or know the rules of F1 visa. I don't know about J1 if they have something similar. Zach, I don't know if you're more familiar with that, but I can only speak for F1 visas because that's what I was on. 3 months prior to graduating college, you apply for OPT. Okay. And I literally think I got mine 2 weeks later after I applied. And it's like a 1-year work visa. So you can work outside, off campus, finally. Right. And then once your 1 year is like over, 3 months or like 2 or 3 months before it's over, you can apply for an extension, an extra 2 years. So if you're a STEM major, so be careful about being a STEM major, because you can be a Bachelor of Arts, you don't get that STEM extension. So make sure you have a Bachelor in Science, okay? Because the US is very strict about this OPT things. I know a lot of people who were some like math major and they were pre-med, but it was like Bachelor of Arts for some reason because they didn't take some type of classes. So just make sure your actual degree is Bachelor's of Science. That way you can get that STEM OPT extension of 3 years. So that's what I did. And I only used 2 out of the 3 years. Yeah. It's a very easy process. You send in the paperwork right before you graduate, and then again when you want to send an extension. And like obviously the place has to like write a letter that you work there, or you have like a job offer letter. It's like very, very like straightforward paperwork that you have to mail, and then you get your little OPT card. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think so. For my 2 years, one of them is still on F1. The second year, I just used my first year of OPT, which I think things are getting better now with all the premium processing, all the like expedited process. You can get it pretty quick, but I think back then it was a good like 3 month process from when I applied to when I even got approved. So I think now it's better. You don't have to think about it too early. But I think it depends on the number of years. I would say OPT is the best choice. And also talk to the international students office at Hopkins. I think there's a lot of like leeway, like there's some grace period with when F1 stops and how long you can stay in the country. You know, those are all things you can consider. But yeah, I'm not too familiar with J1. But I think the J1 thing is especially post-residency, well, not post-resident, post-med school, if you go into a J1 for residency, I think there is a service requirement in your home country. So once you finish that, you will have to leave the US for, I think, 2 years to work in your home country, which also I've heard can be waived in certain situations. But I think J1 is definitely not the best option, but it really depends on the program. Some programs only sponsor J1. But there are places that does sponsor like H1B. You just have, then I think that is something our education resource team is currently wanting to work on, is to do this process, like kind of build MSAR for residency programs. But that obviously it's also like not only school specific, but also program specific. Like even the different departments in the same hospital might have different policies. So that's a different thing and that we're currently working on. But I think most of the international medical students just reach out and email or call and see if they sponsor H1B or J1.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you, Fati. I just got a private chat question. So does taking more gap years hurt your chances as an applicant? Like 1 gap year versus 2 gap years?
No, not at all. Like, obviously, there's got to be a reason why you took those gap years, right? You need to be doing something meaningful, not just like waiting for something to happen. But as long as you're doing something productive during those gap years, you're fine. I don't think there's any disadvantage of taking 1 versus 2. I took 2 because I needed to personally. And I wanted to finish my research and publish my paper. And that's why I took 2 years. Because I wouldn't be able to finish my paper if I only took 1. Because if you're taking a gap year to do research, and especially you're doing bench research, don't expect to publish a paper in a year. It's not going to happen unless the whole project is already set up, but you're not going to be first author. But if you want to work on a first author paper and it's bench research, it takes a long time. So for me, that's why I took 2 gap years, but they do not look down upon gap years. I think if anything now it's a positive thing, right, Zach? At least I know from my class right now and my classmates, there's a huge difference that you're going to see between people who went straight from college and people who took gap years. People who took gap years, I felt like have better study strategies. They're more relaxed. They're dealing with the stress better. Like people who went straight out of college, I felt like are more struggling. But I would encourage a gap year, but if you don't need to take one. But I know people who didn't take internationals who got in, who took 0 gap years, and others who took 3, 4. And it wasn't like a question on the interview, hey, why do you take so many gap years, right? As long as you're doing something meaningful during those gap years.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with that. Like, I think the principle is you should not be thinking about gap year as does it look good? It's more so, do you feel like you're ready to apply? I think that's the most important criteria. Like you feel like you can put your best foot forward, and this moment, this version of you, if you apply, you feel like you have a good chance of at least get an interview and being favored by a school. I think that's the most important part. And don't worry about like gap years. I think at my school, half. I think half did gap years, half didn't. And obviously that means it doesn't really matter. I think one of my cohort has a PhD coming in. So she's like, well, similar age, but she has a PhD. So I think that really depends on where you are in your life and how you feel about applying.
Thank you for the insights. And I got another private chat question. So I think we can squeeze in 2 more questions before we wrap up the Zoom. So okay, let's go ahead with the question. So if I already have AP credit for some STEM courses, should I forfeit them? Should I forfeit them and take the course at the college level? Or should basically, I think it's like, should I use my AP credits or should I just like retake the course? Let's say Chem 1, Chem 2, Calc 1, Calc 2. I mean, that's some courses I have in my mind, stuff like that.
I don't think you should forfeit your AP classes. I mean, I don't think it matters, to be honest. At the end of the day, as long as you have your prereqs, your pre-med requirements, and your MCAT, I don't think that it matters where you took a class from, if it's AP or I'm not very familiar with the AP system because I didn't go to high school here, but I know a little bit, and I don't think, do not forfeit it. If anything, like use that time if you're already like somewhat ahead. Use that time for research or something else.
Yeah, I agree. I think so. I went to IB school, did not do AP, so I don't really know how that works. And Hopkins don't really give any credit to IB classes, which is sad. But I think the one thing I will slightly worry about is I do know people who taken all their AP credits, and I think at Hopkins when you skip Chem 1, you can go into like a equilibrium. And I think something called equilibrium, something.
Like
and I
applied
think that might
chemistry.
be all. Yeah, like applied chemistry about equilibrium. And I think if you are good at, if you're good at chemistry, you skipped Chem 1 and going to that, if it doesn't hurt your GPA, then sure, like definitely take the credit. Like if you can skip the course and use a more advanced level to fulfill as long as you fulfill your pre-med requirement, that's fine. And I just don't want people to like skip all the fundamental courses and go into a harder level and end up hurting their GPA. And that I don't think will look as good. So just make sure that you know that caveat.
Oh, Lily said in the chat, I did IB too and got credits for general biology. Thank you for the update. That's good news. Okay. Does anybody has question you want to ask? Feel free to like shoot me a message or just chat it.
Yeah, I can ask one. So a lot of the time when we see like, I'm sorry about all the noise, I'm really sitting in comments. A lot of the times when we see like the MSAR and the like medians and stuff like that, they always like when you're on the odds are if you're talking to someone, they tell you, oh, but like that doesn't apply to international kids. It's always higher for y'all. But we don't know what the hard cold numbers are. Do you have any like resource or any suggestion where we can find like the cold hard numbers that don't apparently lie for international kids?
I don't think I think overall, like we know that international students need to have a better score than than domestic students, just because we're disfavored in terms of spots, but not that like, oh, we just have to be so much more smarter. We just have to work a little bit harder. But I don't think you will be able to find that, first of all, because of the small sample size. And I don't think MSAR is not that representative. I think it's pretty representative. I think when I applied, I was just at the median. I was like one point above the median for Harvard. So that's pretty representative. I think most of the people around me are probably around that ballpark. And, I think, I don't know where the difference comes in, because with our team where they did research, I think they recently presented a poster and on the research team, it does show that we need to have a higher score, but I don't think it's like, I think it's a kind of a statistics sense, but I don't think it's individual. It always apply to every school. Like if let's say the school's median score is 510, you need a 515 as international students, might not be the case. Because I think as a median, if you're good enough, certain things are going to compensate. So I would still go with that. Like make sure your GPA and your MCAT score is in the ballpark of the median score and apply there. And if you get in, that must mean that I think those scores are just a threshold. I've talked to all the admission officers or like the admission director at Harvard. They don't use that to compare to people. Like you have a 517 and this guy has a 522, then this is definitely better. He's definitely better than you. That's not the case. I think it's more of like you need to pass a threshold to be at least academically competent enough. And I think that score should be using the median that you can find on MSAR.
Thank you. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
For sure. So there is a question from Lydia that is sent to me privately, that except for being familiar with two different health systems, what else do you think made you stand out as an international student?
I think to me personally, and like kind of what I touched on with my monologue earlier is, like being a student athlete and then playing at a competitive level and like still balancing with being pre-med. I think that really what stood me out is time management skills and like perseverance, I think. But that's like me personally was that meaningful experience with tennis, but also, having other interests like research. I also did bench HIV research like Zach did. I was very interested in that and like also was involved in a lot of like global efforts with HIV with the UN. But I really don't think that there's activities. Sure, there are more activities that are more impressive than others, but it's not like, oh, I got to do the most impressive thing to impress them. It's really about like how you talk about your experience, what you learned from it, and did you grow from it. So don't be like looking for like these like amazing opportunities. It's more like even like for simple like volunteering experiences, what did you learn from it? How can you talk about it? What perspective have you gained from that? So like don't stress too much with, oh my gosh, this my one friend, I don't know, went to volunteer with Doctors Without Borders, or like this other friend was is going to like UN conferences or whatever. Like don't be stressed about that. It's like sometimes from the simple things and like just persevering and staying consistent. The fact that you're already like an international student says a lot about you, because you left your comfort zone in your country to go to the US in a new language, a new environment, a new culture, and you're applying to medical school, which is the hardest thing you could do as an international student with like very, very low acceptance rates. So you're already special the way you are. You just got to believe in yourself. And I think that's all. Seriously, like you got it. Like just stay positive. Don't focus on the negative. Obviously, if Zach and I made it, you guys will too. You don't have to have a special story to tell. You just need to have like your own like unique story and like just know how to talk about it, and that's about it. Like, because if you want something as bad as you want it, the fact that you're all here just like in this talk, getting information from me and Zach, that says a lot about you already, because you know how challenging this is, okay? And you're still going after it, even you've heard so many negative comments and so many people telling you can't do it. So just keep doing what you're doing. Focus on that. Focus on building a strong application. Focus on having that median MCAT score for the schools that you want to get in. Focus on like building relationships with your professors, getting really, really good letters of rec, and all those things. They all like are gonna like make you succeed. That's what I think. But yeah, and Zach and I are here to help. And there's like 200 other mentors at F1 Doc. So like Zach was saying, when him and I were applying, we knew one person. Like you guys have 200. You guys can do it for sure. I'm gonna drop my email here and my socials. Feel free to reach out to me in any way that you want. Seriously, I'm always here to help. So yeah, let me know if you have any other questions.
yeah, I don't have anything to add for that. That is great. And I'm also going to drop my email here. I think one thing I just want to say, like, I think a lot of people, whether it's international students or not, make this being international such a negative thing. Ultimately, I think when I applied, I don't think I really felt that discrimination. And besides going on MSAR, you just have schools that you like and they don't take international students. I think about it. I've never, someone came and told me, oh yeah, you need to show me a better score, or oh, you need to show me 20 experiences other than 15, or you have to do 10 recommendation letters. I never felt that. The only part is, you just cannot apply to certain schools. And so other than that, I do think that your international experience itself, as Fati beautifully put it, it's not something you have to like let shine. Like you have to deliberately say something about your international background. It's like you being so far away from home and thriving to be at the interview table, that itself is who you are and who you bring to the table. And I think anything above that is only going to be better. Like if you had experience that you want to talk about comes from your journey, like not all international students have some sort of story. Like, watching the Oscars, I'm assuming most of us didn't come on a refugee boat. So, those things, if it doesn't happen to you, just, being international is going to actually let you stand apart. So one of the things I did some math on when I was looking at MSAR data is once as international students, you've got an interview, your chance of getting in is twice as high as in American students. So you have twice the chance of getting in once you get an interview. So I think that speaks volume is about who we are, not about this is not about we're just not as good to get in. It's because of the process, it's intrinsically favoring domestic students, understandably so. But if you look at the admission rates post-interview, it's actually twice as high. So that speaks volume about who we are and how much we have put in the work. So just, once you get an interview, pat yourself on the back, and I think you will feel great.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys will charm your way through getting an acceptance if you get an interview. Like I've had great conversation in all my interviews. Like I literally enjoyed it. I'm like, finally, like all this hard work, and I get to this interview and I'm having these like amazing conversations with like all this faculty and everything, because you are already interesting. You're a very interesting person already. So you don't have to sell a lot about who you are at the interview. You're on paper, you were really good, you get the interview, don't mess it up, you got it. Like Zach was saying, you have twice the chance to get in. So that says a lot about you.
All right. Thank you for the very inspiring talk. And then, so now it's a little past 9 actually. So I really appreciate everybody's time. And then special thanks to our 2 speakers, Fati and Zach. And I wish you guys all the best in the future. And we will continue on working on ours for sure.